Right, in a bid to make a quick buck, a boat operator overpacked a double-decker boat in Thoovaltheeram beach of Malappuram district in Kerala. Off late, of course, Kerala has caught the imagination of tourists as God's own country. This particular boat was a recreational one. It was supposed to be a joyride that turned fatal for 22 passengers, including children. The boat operator has now been booked for murder, but the officials who are responsible to check if rules are followed go scot-free. Is this how we fix accountability in this country? The smallest pawn is penalized as mere tokenism, but the higher-ups seem to enjoy immunity. 22 lives, including 15 children, drowned, not just because rules were flouted, but also because life jackets, rescue boats were not made available on time. At every level, local officials who are paid with taxpayers' money have failed the citizens. And now more taxpayers' money, of course, will flow into compensation that has been promptly announced by the state government. Is that enough? Is this how we fix accountability? Clearly not, because the Kerala High Court, taking up the matter suo motu, has said that the accident has happened as a result of a deadly cocktail of callousness, greed and official apathy. Let's put out for our viewers what the court has said exactly. The court noted that such tragedies have been occurring in the state for years now. It's only due to abject failure of law enforcement that the fear of law is completely missing. It is not acting as any deterrent. In terms of action taken so far, murder charges under Section 302 IPC invoked against the boat owner Nasser by the state police, and the court has asked the Malappuram district collector to file a report on the 12th of May. The larger question here is the case highlights the apathy that is endemic to our system. And why we say this is because it's still fresh in our memory what happened in Gujarat in the Morbi tragedy. There again, over 140 people died due to a bridge collapse where a tourist location where this bridge was located, where the operator again oversold tickets beyond its capacity. It's the same story again, where a boat operator, eager to make a fast buck, overpacked the boat and it went well beyond its capacity. We'll put out for you in terms of graphics as well on what were the lapses, why this happened. If we can put out the tragedy, the lapses that caused this tragedy, the graphics that we made on that. These are the lapses, yes. The carrying capacity was 20. Passengers that were loaded into this boat, 40. The boat had no safety certifications. There were no life jackets available to the passengers. Look at the level and extent of non-compliance of very, very basic safety measures not in place. In fact, the boat also flouted rules in terms of the timings that were given. It was well past the permissible limit for this particular boat to go on this ride. So these are the rules that were flouted. There was absolutely no one to enforce these rules because these were flouted not in this instance but repeatedly, which my colleague Vivek will tell us. Let me go across live to Vivek. Vivek, why we are saying this was a tragedy waiting to happen. There's a reason for it. This was not the first time that rules were flouted. You know, this is what happens when you take a chance over and over and over again. One day you have to face the outcome of breaking those rules. Over to you, Vivek, to tell us what is the action being taken now against those who are responsible for this.
Yes, Afrida, as you clearly said, that there is at multiple levels, the rules and regulations have been clearly been flouted as far as this boat is concerned. Now, the action being taken, it's actually, yes, the owner of the boat has been arrested now. And there are certain rules and regulations that's already been set by the port authorities and also by the tourism department for a tourist boat to operate. Now, as far as this particular boat is concerned, called Atlantica, it has been operating for the last 5 years. And for the last 1 year, it has been operating as a tourist boat. But you need to understand that for a tourist boat to operate, as far as the structure of the boat is concerned, there are certain parameters that need to be followed. As far as this boat is concerned, this was a fishing boat that has been used for the last 6 years, and for the last 1 year, the owner of this boat called Nasser changed the structure without even informing the authorities, and he managed to change it to a tourist boat, and also he managed to get a permit through frivolous manner, and
Okay.
he operated it according to his whims and fancies. 22 members, 22 is the total number of people, which can be withheld, which can be, supported by this boat. But most of the time, these boats have been operated with more than 40 to 50 people, who have been asked to stay, enter inside. Now, when this incident happened on Saturday, the officials, allowed 39 people, mostly women and children, to enter. Now, also important to note that it is 5:30 is the time in which these operators should stop their operation. But shockingly, this boat started its, venture at around 6:45, and by 7:30, between 7:30 and 7:45, the boat started sliding towards left side, and it lost its control, and the entire boat turned
Yes,
upside
we are
down.
hearing so many
Leading
different
the
accounts, Vivek, even that while the boat was about to set sail, there were people warning the boat operator to stop. Even at that time, if good sense had prevailed, 22 lives would have been saved. Vivek, thanks for joining us with all the important inputs. You have given us a very interesting explanation on what all went wrong. And I just got to know from Vivek that here is somebody who's managed to get a certificate, a no objection certificate, I imagine, to operate this boat. It was never meant to be a tourist boat, from what Vivek tells us now. It was a fishing boat, which was modified to make it a tourist boat and then acquire a certificate by, in all probability, unfair means, due diligence not followed. It happens all across the country. Will this one become an eye-opener? That's the question. In fact, the Kerala High Court has raised some very important observations after this incident. Let me welcome Mr. K.V. Dhananjay, Advocate of the Supreme Court, joining us here on the program. Good evening, Mr. Dhananjay. I'm sure you're as disturbed to see what has happened here. In fact, two incidents today that we are reporting, another one in Khargon as well, of how, caution is thrown to the winds. And here are people who are eager to make money, who flout rules. But there's a reason why we have elected governments. There's a reason why we have district authorities, civic bodies. None of them seems to be doing their job when it comes to enforcing the law. Who would you hold responsible, and how is accountability fixed in a situation like this?
Well, when something tragic like this happens, we should always be mindful of the fact that we didn't spot this beforehand, which means that this may not be an isolated incident, and it's the elected representatives to always start with, and we have a set of bureaucrats. Now, these are bureaucrats that are paid salaries, every month, and it is their responsibility to make sure that all of these shipping vessels or the boat vessels are not just fit, but then they're also properly maintained, because the kind of certificates that are issued after annual inspections is certainly not enough to secure tourist safety. It requires around the year monitoring. And I think on that aspect, whatever we've seen now, and particularly that this was going on for the last 5 years, tells us that the oversight mechanism in Kerala has miserably failed. And it's important that when an event of this nature happens, that we blame enough people, because it's always blame that will set into motion several more things that will bring about accountability. And the bureaucrats concerned, they too deserve to be put to a disciplinary inquiry, if not outright made part of a FIR. I understand an FIR has already been filed here in this case, but the boat regulator certainly can't be a person who sits in his office for a period of 5 years and did not notice it. As much as your reporters who go to the ground are told by people around that, look, this person was operating in this manner for such a long time, it's important also for the government of Kerala to address what the bureaucrats were doing, and perhaps put them to a disciplinary test and ask how is it that they did not come to know about it over a period of 5 years. And that's a very serious lapse. And while we are dealing with this one incident, it's equally important to also open up our eyes to the possibility that lurks in other cases within Kerala, in other areas within Kerala, because if this certainly appears to be a systemic issue.
Yes.
It would have been a different matter had someone just started operation last week or last month, and notwithstanding that he had
So
a
are you
permit to
saying,
let in
Mr.
only 10.
Dhananjay, that usually in something like this, there is complicity of the authorities? They turn a blind eye, and there's a reason they turn a blind eye. They are together in this. Often enough, licenses are given for a price. Do you think that
Very
that
true.
is where the correction needs to be made, where there is corruption in the system, and when there is rampant corruption, something of this nature manifests?
Very much. The corruption is, of course, always a straightforward explanation to why something like this happens, because the regulator, the board regulator in that locality, cannot possibly come before the camera and say that he's been inspecting this area for the last 5 years and that he never came across this particular board. Certainly, that is at variance with what people there are saying to the media, that this person was a regular operator. He's been operating for a very long time. So the fact that he was not caught all the while tells us that this matter. This was a case where the officers were complicit, and what action has been taken against the officers concerned? Now it's all right for the chief minister to shed tears and say that compensation of rupees 10 lakhs has been awarded, but we should understand that compensation is never going to make people whole. It's never going
Yes.
to bring a measure of solace to those families which have lost their loved ones here. And of course, there is so much more for the government to do, because in almost all of these cases, death certificates are very hard to come by, because this case is now the subject of a police investigation. Death certificates don't come by. And that also means that if some of those who perished had life insurance, it becomes almost impossible for them to collect life insurance because death certificates are not given by the authorities concerned. So
Right.
that's an aspect, unfortunately, is not which we in India overlook, but then that's really very critical.
It
And
requires an
I do not
overhaul
know.
of the system then, Mr. Dhananjay. What you are telling us is also, in fact, echoing exactly what the Kerala High Court has observed. It says these tragedies trigger routine investigations followed by recommendations, but never to be headed thereafter. It's not followed through. And what you're telling us is even more tragic, that the families affected by this probably will have to run pillar to post even to get that basic compensation that is being announced. The problem here is it's not about Kerala. It has sold itself as a God's own country. In fact, it has caught the imagination as a tourist destination. So, for a state like that, where there are people from across the country who visit these places, we cannot afford to have a non-compliance of safety measure. It means that you have absolutely no regard for human life. Tourists who come there will also have to probably stake their life if they take a boat of there, and if the due diligence is not followed. It's a risk which extends beyond Kerala, is what I'm trying to say.
Very much. Of course, we're not just discussing about this particular incident has bearing special relation to Kerala. Many of things that we discuss here today certainly would be greatly relevant to practically every other part of the country. And in relative terms, Kerala might have a better record, but we do not really have to sit down and compare now, because this is a tragedy. And notwithstanding that, Kerala government might say that you look at a period of 25 years in the past, there have been fewer incidents like this than anywhere else in the country. And even if the government were to make an argument to that effect, that argument is to no way, because right now we have a human tragedy and we have to deal with it with all the seriousness. And it's never going to be possible to do that if we start looking into, okay, which state, in fact, is relatively better off in this area. I think Kerala is, of course, just is exposing this scenario. And the other aspect that I would like to touch upon is, all of these witness certificates and all that, are they available online for anybody to see? If we take the example of some of the Nordic countries, I understand that when they had a similar mishap, I think 10 or 12 years earlier, what the regulators did is to protect the tourists, they would in fact make sure that all of these boats outside would have a big sticker that's visible from a faraway distance, a sticker that is renewed every year, the sticker that will have the map of the locality, and then the year for which the sticker is issued. And next to that sticker is another big sticker that will say how many people can be accommodated inside. So if there is a marriage party of 20 persons, they can look at a boat from a distance and see that the boat is only licensed to carry 7. So they would not pay the boat manager first and then go inside. and then realize that the boat is not fit to carry that many. And all of these difficulties can be avoided. So while we make laws, and these laws are about officers routinely inspecting and officers issuing fitness certificates, we
Yes.
must also realize that our laws don't really catch up to the modern times. We're not protecting our tourists enough. And for that to happen, I think we have to take some of the policies that the Nordic countries have. We should try to emulate that. Having a
Yes.
sticker visible from a distance and all of that, I think will go a long way.
Which is why simply booking the boat operator, who probably is a poor man who is eager to make some money, and that is there in everyone, in a lot of people. So unless you have action taken on the higher authorities, simply as tokenism booking the boat operator is not going to change anything from what I understand from what you're telling us, Mr. Dhananjay. But tell me, if you can just hold on for a bit, I want to come back to you on the other incident as well that has happened in Khargone in Madhya Pradesh. These are all instances that are connected in a way, because here you have another case where human lives were lost, exactly again the same number, 22 people died, several others injured after a bus fell from a bridge in Khargone in Madhya Pradesh. The incident happened when the bus skidded off from 20-feet bridge. 3 children, 6 women among those who lost their life. Rescue operations are currently underway. Prime Minister Modi again has announced an ex gratia of 2 lakh from the Prime Minister's National Relief Fund to the kin of the deceased and 50,000 to the injured. Madhya Pradesh Home Minister Narottam Mishra has expressed grief over this incident. In fact, Chief Minister Shivraj Singh Chauhan has also announced 4 lakh compensation to the kin. Let's listen in to the inputs coming in before we go for a quick reaction from Mr. Dhananjay.
हमने जो भाई बहन रहे उनके परिवार के लिए 4 लाख रुपए की सहायता निधि की घोषणा की है। गंभीर रूप से घायल को 50,000 और सामान्य घायलों को 10,000। इंदौर में भी इलाज की संपूर्ण व्यवस्थाएं की है, जिनको ले जाना पड़े वहां उनके इलाज की बेहतर व्यवस्था हो जाए। हम जिन भाई बहन को बचा नहीं पाए, बस दुर्घटना में नहीं बच पाए, सभी दिवंगत आत्मा को प्रभु शांति दे, उनके परिवार को गहन दुख सहन करने की क्षमता दे। संकट की घड़ी में हम सरकार उनके साथ खड़ी, उन परिवारों के साथ खड़ी है।
दुखद हादसा हुआ है खरगोन में।
निश्चित रूप से काफी पीड़ादायी प्रसंग है। निकल के चले गए थे वो, उससे रेलिंग तोड़ती हुई बस ड्राई नदी में एक गिर गई है। इंदौर से सुबह 8:40 की घटना है। दसंगा और डोंगर घाट के बीच में बारूण नदी पर जो पुल बना था, 15 लोग की अभी प्रथम सूचना आई है मरने की। 20-25 लोग घायल हैं। सभी 20-25 का इलाज पूरा किया जा रहा है और माननीय मुख्यमंत्री जी ने जांच के साथ साथ 4-4 लाख रुपए परिवार को, मृतकों को देने को कहा।
9:15 बजे घटना है।
अच्छा,
बस आ रही थी इधर से। लग रहा चालक की लापरवाही से गाड़ी गिरी नीचे।
अच्छा,
रेलिंग तोड़ के नीचे गिरी है।
अच्छा,
पास के गांव में रहता हूँ मैं।
हाँ।
सभी ग्रामीण 2 से 3 मिनट में आ चुके थे यहाँ पे। जिस समय आया उस समय गाड़ी में पूरी चित पुकार मची हुई थी पूरी।
तो कितने लोग थे गाड़ी में अंदाजन?
तो 50 के आसपास मान के चलो, पूरी गाड़ी भरी हुई थी।
अच्छा, कितने लोग मरे इसमें?
इसमें सर 15 से 20 तो ये मान के चलो कि हमने जिस समय निकाल रहे थे हम उनको
जी,
15 से 20 लोग तो मरे उस समय। और निकले जो घायल उनमें भी मतलब बचना बहुत मुश्किल है, बहुत ज्यादा उसमें डेथ होगी।
अच्छा, तो क्या ड्राइवर की लापरवाही थी?
हाँ, बस बहुत फास्ट थी गाड़ी। जो चरवाहे वगैरह थे उन्होंने बताया बहुत फास्ट थी गाड़ी।
ये गाड़ी कहाँ से आ रही थी?
सर ये बरूड़ से इंदौर के लिए चलती है।
Mr. Dhananjay, only from the perspective of how the state transport or public transport operators do not take rules seriously, even on speeding. If there are certain stretches that require a certain amount of caution in how you drive through that stretch, that training, that awareness perhaps is never created, which is why we keep having instances of this nature. 22 lives lost again in Madhya Pradesh as well.
Where 20s are passenger vehicles, so passenger vehicles are generally expected to be subject to greater regulation than private vehicles. Now, if you take the temple town of Tirupati, and if you start from the base of the hill, by the time you reach the top of the hill, there is this mechanism by which they would want to know how much time you took, and in that they will find out if you sped, if you actually been speeding, and if you crossed the speeding limit. So that in fact brought down accidents in Tirupati temple town substantially, because that check happens to each and every vehicle that passes by there. The moment you want to enter into the hill, your vehicle is registered, and then your vehicle is given a token, and then when you go up to the top of the hill, there is always, because they know that you can't rest anywhere in between, so they would be able to accurately identify if you cross the speeding limit, and they would fine you for that. I think we need to vigorously enforce mechanisms like that across the country. But these are passenger vehicles, so
Right.
they always have a point from which they leave or a point that they traverse. It's important to regulate them in that manner. As much as the Kerala High Court has taken upon the issue and is now monitoring this case, I think it's equally expected that the Madhya Pradesh High Court too would intervene in this matter, because unless and until there is judicial intervention, and judicial intervention can produce a great deal of good in cases like this, unless and until there is judicial intervention, because once there is some kind of a judicial intervention, it's possible that a large number of public-spirited persons would be able to go before the court and then point out how they themselves have been waging battle against all of such irregularities which the authorities turn a blind eye towards. That's because, very often when you have a tragedy, there is some affected family member who would take up actually a fight to ensure that, against the authorities, to ensure that such incidents do not repeat. Those people would really go over to the courts, and it therefore is very much necessary for the Madhya Pradesh High Court also to begin intervention in this case, just as how the Kerala High Court has done. So I think, that's how we approach this.
Yes, it's a very important point. The judicial intervention in cases of this nature is extremely critical, so that, like you said, public-spirited persons will take this matter more seriously. It cannot be simply statistics that come and go and everybody forgets about it the next day. And I think the Kerala High Court has very adequately reflected on that aspect as well, that things happen, inquiries are initiated, it's never followed through. Look at what happened in Morbi tragedy. Over 140 people lost their lives there as well. Thank you so much, Mr. K.V. Dhananjay, for joining us here on the program, for enlightening us with important points about these issues with regards to how judicial intervention can help, how certain safety compliances cannot be compromised with, because it would endanger public safety to a great deal. Lessons must be learned. We leave it at that for now, but let's listen into the ground report that is coming in from Madhya Pradesh on the Khargon incident, the tragedy that took 22 lives.
देख सकते हैं कि जिस तरीके से ये इंदौर से खरगोन की ओर बस जा रही थी और करीब 20 फीट की ऊंचाई से ये गाड़ी गिरी है, और गाड़ी गिरने के बाद में पूरी गाड़ी पलटी खा गई, जिसमें करीब 14 से 15 लोगों की मौत हुई है और कई लोग घायल हुए हैं। साथ ही मैं बता दूं आपको कि इसमें कम से कम 40 से 50 लोग शामिल थे। प्रशासनिक अमला मौके पर पहुंचा, तत्काल घायलों को जिला चिकित्सालय भेजा गया। साथ ही जो प्राथमिक स्वास्थ्य केंद्र है वहां पर इन घायलों को भेजा गया। उसके बाद उनको खरगोन रेफर किया गया। जो मृत लोग हैं उनको अभी जो प्राथमिक स्वास्थ्य केंद्र डोंगरगांव, वहां पे उनकी बॉडी को रखा गया, उनकी शिनाख्त की जाएगी। और जिस तरीके से दुर्घटना हुई है, तो कहीं ना कहीं अब ये लापरवाही किस तरीके से सामने आ रही है, जांच का विषय है।